Welcome, everyone, to the Department Number 2 podcast brought to you by the Western Theater in the Civil War. And tonight, Darryl and I have Mr. Taylor Bishop, and he is going to be talking to us about the very well known and huge Battle of Tebbs Bend, Kentucky. And so we will be getting to that here shortly. But before we do, just want to remind you to check out our website at westerntheatercivilwar.com. There you can check out all of our blogs, blog posts, nearly 300 of them. We've got links to our YouTube channel and the other episodes that you might have missed. And also, there is a tab on there to support us. So if you feel so inclined, there is just click the Buy Me a Coffee link and you can just put whatever amount you want in there. If you appreciate what we're doing, if you just want to help us out, especially with these monthly subscription fees that we have to pay for Podcastle and Wix and everything else, that it would be greatly appreciated. So without further ado, let's just go ahead and jump into this. So Taylor, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good, Derek. How are you doing?
Just great. Summertime.
That's good. That's good. That's tour time. It is tour
Yes,
time. Time to get out on the battlefields.
that's
And
right.
boys,
That's what I'm
speaking
wanting
of
to do.
battlefield, we're going to be talking about Tebbs Bend, the turning point of the Civil War. If you haven't known it yet, folks, Robert E. Lee retreats from Gettysburg after he receives word that Morgan has been defeated at Tebbs Bend, and of course, John Pemberton surrenders soon thereafter at
He knows the
Vicksburg, and
game's up at that point. Yeah.
it's
Yeah,
all
it's over.
because of Tebbs
Failed
Bend.
surrender.
It's
Yeah.
over. Yeah, I completely agree. July 4th, right? The
That is
salient
right.
point of the war, right?
That's right.
Starts at Thames Bend,
So
right?
it all starts there and everything crumbles from there. Most people don't know this. This is a fact that's just not well known.
Well, people aren't studying the official records like they probably should.
It is
So,
exactly right, as they should be.
That's right. Yeah, there's a friend of mine, Greg Biggs. He was talking about one time. He was several years ago. He was given a tour on Tullahoma campaign, and kind of mentioning, July 1863. You got Gettysburg, you've got Vicksburg, and you can't forget how important Tullahoma was. And he said in the back of the tour bus, said this lady stands up and she yells, "And Tibbs Bend," and it was Betty Bourne. So,
That is exactly right.
and Betty, she wrote a book about this and about the area. It's called is it Morgan is
Morgan is
Morgan is
coming.
Morgan is
coming.
coming. Yep, had to turn around and look on the shelf there. Yep,
Yeah,
Always
there
there it
you
is
got
right
it.
there.
Always got it.
Morgan is coming.
Yeah,
It's
it's a
one of the
great book.
best.
So
Yeah, it's
hopefully
great local
after
history.
yes, hopefully after our conversation tonight, people will go shopping and pick that thing up.
Exactly right.
So Taylor, tell us about the situation here in 1863. What gets us to this
Yeah.
place called Tebbs Bend
Yeah.
in Kentucky?
So to really understand Ted's Bend, you have got to understand how and why people are there. Why is it important, especially for the Great Raid of 1863? And you really have to begin kind of in 1861. Federal forces there under General William T. Ward, I believe, come into Tebbs Bend and establish what was known as um, Camp Ward or Camp Hobson, rather. And it's there that these troops kind of assimilate around like the bottom fields around next to the Green River Bridge. And they're basically using it as a way to kind of get down into Columbia, start recruiting there. But it's just generally a winter camp. And the main thing about the Tebbs Bend area is that there is a vital road that stretches all the way from Lebanon down to Columbia, and it can even take you all the way down to the Cumberland River. So, I mean, it is a road that federal troops are going to be using throughout the entire Civil War, to be quite frank. During early 1862, January of 1862, actually, General George H. Thomas will move a force through Tibbs Bend on his way down to Mill Springs. There's a good Andrew Miller spot right there for him, so he can kind of get that Mill Springs plug
That's
in
right.
there.
Go back and listen.
That's right. Um, so after that, you have a lot of troops just kind of moving in and out of the Tibbs Bend area. And then during the Christmas raid of 1862, which goes from basically December to January, um, Morgan, John Hunt Morgan, or John Morgan, as Darryl likes to always remind us.
Seriously,
Uh,
seriously.
so he's going to be coming through there. He'll come through Tubbs Bend on that great raid towards the final stretch around January 1st of 1863. He'll come through. He will burn the Green River Bridge across there, as well as the federal stockade that was erected there actually during the winter of 1861 and 1862. And whenever the federal forces arrive there, they'll actually get stuck, and it creates like a bottleneck, a choke point, where they are kind of forced to delay their march to try to catch Morgan. for quite some time, and effectively it seals the federal pursuit against Morgan for that entire raid. Kind of thereafter, again, you have more troops kind of moving in. You have the Ninth Corps, elements of them. They come into the Tebbs Bend region, specifically the 79th New York Highlanders, as well as the 8th Michigan Infantry. The 2nd Michigan also gets there. But it's kind of important to note that a lot of those Ninth Corps guys are staying there maybe temporarily, and they're just going down to the Cumberland River where they're, kind of scattering out there. And this is in, the early, and I hesitate to even say this, the early stages of the Knoxville campaign, because let's just be honest, Burnside is not really wanting to get that thing going during the summer of 63 if he can. But nevertheless, during the Vicksburg campaign, again, I believe, didn't Andrew Miller work at Vicksburg as well?
Oh my
So
gosh.
I think I'm getting him.
Who are we talking to? Is this
You know,
Miller we have on? What's going on?
This is a
I mean,
special Andrew Miller podcast. That's the secondary name for it.
That's
Or,
right.
or Taylor, are you getting coin every time you drop his name? Is that what?
I mean, I'm not gonna say that I'm getting some money out of this deal from Miller, but I mean, if you didn't know, Andrew Miller does work at Mill Springs,
Yeah.
so go check down there. But nevertheless, so the Ninth Corps will actually, an entire division will actually move through the Tebbs Bend region on their way to the Vicksburg campaign, and in doing so, they'll actually leave a contingent of roughly about 40 or so men from the 79th New York Highlanders and the 8th Michigan under the command of a Lieutenant Michael H. Hogan. And a lot of these guys have experience in engineer work. A lot of them have built bridges. They've done construction either in New York City or back home in Detroit, Michigan. It just depends on wherever they're at. Nevertheless, Hogan will actually recruit some civilian contractors to even come down to help repair the bridge that Morgan had burned down. And then that's where you start slowly but surely getting the federal force that we're really going to be talking about in this podcast is the 25th Michigan under the command of Orlando H. Moore. This guy is from the Michigan area. He is an ardent abolitionist. He'll actually get in trouble in Louisville because he tries to break up a lot of the slave auctions that are happening in Kentucky. And in doing so, of course, you're going to make a lot of the Kentuckians mad. So he has to be sent out of the city. And in doing so, his regiment, the 25th Michigan, will be kind of split up. So about 200 or so men will be sent down to the Tebbs Bend region, kind of like an exile. They're not really allowed to come back for a little while. And Moore is ordered to stay at this post at Tebbs Bend. And their camp is actually just a little bit off from the Green River Bridge. You can actually go there today and see where their campsite was, which is pretty neat. And so that's where we kind of get those federal forces that are there. Meanwhile, you have the Confederates. So after his, glorious Christmas raid of 1862 to 1863, Morgan will spend a lot of the time. Darryl, help me if I'm wrong here, but he's going to spend a lot of that time around the Snow Hill area, just kind of skirmishing with federal forces.
Yes,
right?
he's east of Murfreesboro. Forces are kind of scattered along that line. So you've got Forrest on the western flank, and you've got Morgan on the eastern flank. And so, yes, you've got a various amount of skirmishes where Morgan's men don't really perform very well.
That's right. And so it isn't until the spring and almost into the summer of 1863 that Morgan is just itching to get into another raid. I mean, if you study Morgan, you know that he needs to get his name in the newspapers. I mean, he is just that type. I mean, you look at all those raids that he goes into. That is the number one trait I think of Morgan, is that he likes to get that fame and popularity that he needs to get. But nevertheless, he assembles basically what is left of his division, the crack guys, roughly about 2,400 ish or so guys. They're all going to be mounted up. And these are the ones that are not sick, the ones that have the good horses, and these guys are all itching for essentially, I mean, as we know it today, is a great raid. It is going to be a big raid, and Morgan has some audacious plans. And when he kind of floats this idea up to the staff, and of course Braxton Bragg, he's kind of like, hey, let me hit the Lebanon or not the Lebanon, but the Louisville-Nashville Railroad, and kind of destroyed the vital supply line that is feeding Rosecrans's army, who is kind of getting and gearing up for the Tullahoma campaign. And of course, Bragg is like, okay, this could be a good idea, but do not get above the Ohio River. Let's stay inside Kentucky. And Morgan understands this. I'm doing air quotes right now, but as we kind of know, once this raid kicks off, Morgan has no intention of staying in Kentucky. He's going to make his big move and a big gamble and get up into the northern states. So, nevertheless, Morgan is going to leave his bases in and around the Sparta area, again, east of Murfreesboro, and he's going to slowly but surely start snaking their way up to this region or in and around Tebbs Bend. They're going to start crossing the Cumberland River around Burkesville. A lot of those ferries around June 30th into July 1st. I mean, they're kind of stretching some of those days in. Some of the guys, especially the early elements, get in a little bit earlier. But largely, they're not facing a lot of federal resistance. Sometimes they might take a little bit of a skirmish, but nothing to the extent that is a contested crossing. And there's a lot of reasons behind this. One of the divisional commanders in the area, I believe his name is, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's Henry M. Judah. Is that how you pronounce his last
Yeah.
name? I believe. So he is just, what's the best way to put it? Very bad at commanding troops, I would say, to be quite frank, especially after Resaca comes out. But he is largely not really understanding where Morgan is going to get into. He actually shifts a lot of his troops away from the Burkesville area. And the one guy that kind of understands where Morgan is going to be coming through is Edward Hobson, who actually, is Camp Hobson is named after in Tebbs Bend. And he tries to contest him, but is actually ordered to go away from where Morgan was at until it's too late. Nevertheless, Morgan's troops will get into, they'll finally get across around July 2nd and into the 3rd, and they'll slowly start moving towards Columbia, Kentucky, which is just, as the crow flies, only a couple minutes away from Tebbs Bend. And it's at Columbia that they'll engage in it's almost like, just a running fight. They'll hit the Federals out there from just several federal forces. 1st Kentucky was involved out there. They get overwhelmed by Morgan's greater force, and then they're run through the town. A lot of them are captured. Some of them escape and scatter elsewhere, and they tell the federal forces in the area what's going on. And after that particular battle, that is when a lot of the things for Morgan's command start slipping up. His intelligence officer, who's supposed to be his scout, is wounded grievously actually the day prior, and then the next guy that took after him took over, and then after that you get a lowly new green officer, Tom Franks, I believe, who's given this grave task of trying to do some reconnaissance out into the Tebbs Bend region to try to figure out what's going on there. And the main reason why Morgan is wanting to get into there is he can burn the bridge again. So any federal forces that are closely falling behind him is going to get put into that choke point, and it's going to slow him down just a little bit. That scouting officer, Tom Franks, is going to find out very quickly that the federal forces are digging in, but they're also somewhat green. There's not that many of them. And it's worth the taking, to him. He kind of gives this back to Morgan, and Morgan has that air of, overconfidence that his men can easily take him, that it'll just be a pushover, quick victory. They'll be able to do it. Doesn't matter. They can get it done. And so that's on the end of July 3rd. I'm going to flip it back over to the federal forces. In the meantime, during the preceding days before Tebbs Bend happens, the main battle on the 4th, Moore is going to very quickly realize that as he's getting word from the federal forces south of his position in Columbia and even further, that Morgan is more than likely going to come into this area. And rather than waiting for Morgan to come get him, he is going to start sending troops from his camp on where the bridge is at on the Green River across into what was known as the Narrows. Imagine a time glass where the very thin part of that time glass, that is what is known as the Narrows. So if you're kind of picturing that in mind, that is where Moore is going to do. So if you were facing south towards Columbia, all right, on the left side is the Green River. On the right side is a very steep slope. I know you guys have been out to Tebbs Bend, and you can know how steep that slope is, especially on a hot summer day.
Yeah,
it wears out even the fittest of us. So it is one that you cannot climb easily. And so what Moore is going to do is he's going to create a battlefield that is prepared. It is not a battlefield that is just thrown haphazardly. Moore is going to scout out the positions that, if Morgan attacks, how can I best effectively fire upon him without any kind of artillery, without any kind of nearby support, just with the troops that he has on hand. And so they're going to start digging in. They'll dig, rifle pits, breastworks. They'll put abasti or abasti, however you want to pronounce it. I'm sure there's 1,000 different ways to pronounce it. In between those, and there's, a couple dozen yards in between that. And there's actually a moat in front of the breastworks. So if you're trying to picture this all in your mind, imagine at the very narrowest part of this position, you have the breastworks, and a couple dozen or so yards in between that is a bunch of just sharpened abasti, just trees and limbs that are just sharpened, thrown in there, twisted around. And then in front of that is a rifle pit. And on the ends of the rifle pits, there's actually trenches that his troops can actually get in and start moving back towards the main breastworks whenever the main attack actually happens. And so the way that the position is kind of set up is so that whenever Morgan does attack, all he sees first is the rifle pit. And then if he decides to engage, like really send his troops in, that's when that rifle pit is no longer really a good position. And it's just basically the jaws of death for Morgan's men. And we'll get to there in a minute. But that is kind of where we're at in setting up right before the battle.
Right. So it sounds like it's several layers that he's got prepared.
It is. It is a layered defense that, again, is prepared. And that's just something that I think that it speaks a lot about to the leadership of Moore, is that he is, he is given a serious, tough situation, and he's not going to shirk away from it. He's going to face it full on.
Yeah, I think there's a big difference in the leadership that you see from both sides here at this fight, I feel like. And
very much so.
With Morgan, emotion, like this seems like it was an emotional decision that he ends up making. Can you tell us kind of what had happened just prior to Tebbs Bend with Morgan?
Well, I believe there's a lot of things that are going on. I know, and for a fact, Darryl, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't he get married before this raid?
Well, he got married right before the Christmas raid. He was married in December,
that's right.
And then in between Hartsville and then the Christmas raid. So he's married. He's married Maddie Reddy or Reedy, and Murfreesboro Belle. Comes from a very prestigious family. But that does tie in as far as, and maybe that's where Derrick might have been leading a little bit, but I mean, that ties into what also happens to Morgan's command between the marriage and the launch of the not so great raid. So you have these various skirmishes and activities that are happening on that eastern flank of Murfreesboro. And oftentimes Mr. Morgan is nowhere near the front. He is with his wife. And so, I mean, even one of his officers basically bemoans the fact that he got married because he thought it was the demise of Morgan. And that's the Englishman that serves with him, George St. Leger Grenfell, makes that comment. Grenfell, though, also has a little bit of a I don't know, he wanted command of the 2nd Brigade, which doesn't go to him. And so Grenville, I think, resigns or gets, distances himself from the command at that point. But, the emotional part, I think where Derrick was leading to a little bit was you got Moore being very methodical, very much a planner. Morgan has had success on the battlefield, which a lot of it was luck, but that's okay. You want a lucky battlefield commander. But Hartsville was very good. The Christmas raid, it's a great raid, but I'm not sure what it really accomplishes. That's one of those things where he does a really nice job, moving, keeps going, 3,000 men under his command. But I think it's his ego, right, that kind of gets bruised with all these things that are going on. And people are talking about this whole, it's not with the command. His command continues to lose these various skirmishes and whatnot. And I think, the Great Raid is a little bit of an ego trip. And to Derrick's point, I mean, he could have went around, but he doesn't. And he goes straight on, right? It heads right at him.
Exactly.
So,
yeah, there's some big consequences for doing that too, which I'm sure we'll get to here shortly.
Yeah. Exactly. So from there, setting up the stage to this battle. So early in the morning of July 4th, Morgan's men are going to start moving out of the Cane Valley region in Adair County. They're heading north towards the Tebbs Bend region. Roughly early in the morning, and I'm meaning well before 6 o'clock, you start having skirmishing. And the great thing about this skirmish that starts to happen is that Moore has somehow been able to mount some of his men. And as the skirmish is progressing, they're trying to contest the ground for as long as they possibly can. But these mounted guys are coming back and forth, telling Moore, where these troops are coming from, where they're getting into position, and how they're attacking. It's giving more time, but it's also giving the vital intelligence that he's going to need as this fight is going to be opening up. And before this fight really does open up, one thing I'd like to mention on my tours at Tebbs Bend is that there's a big disadvantage early on the onset with Morgan and Moore, as we're going to divest a little bit more into it. But the thing that is going to help Moore arguably the most is that he is going to have interior lines of communication, which means that his troops are going to be able to move back and forth much faster than Morgan's guys are. And on the opposite side, Morgan's guys have exterior lines of communication. So Morgan is having to go all the way around the Tebbs Bend area to be able to just communicate with troops. And I'll get into some of those troops in here in just a second. But nevertheless, the skirmishing starts opening up, and Morgan is slowly but surely moving into the Narrows part. Now, earlier that morning, and I mean very early, Roy S. Kluge, the colonel of the 8th Kentucky Cavalry, is going to take his force in a contingent of the 10th Kentucky Partisan Rangers, which, Derek, I mean, I know I'm touching into your territory
Those are my
now.
boys.
They are going to take this contingent, which is a couple of hundred guys, and move all the way around the Tebbs Bend area. They're actually guided by some of the local boys in Morgan's outfit, and they're going to go all the way around the Tebbs Bend area, and they're going to get above where the Green River Bridge is. So the idea going into this attack for Morgan is that he wants to box in the Federals that are there, ensure that they can't escape, and those who try to, they're going to get caught. And that's how Morgan gets that exterior line of communication as he's getting closer to the Tebbs Bend region. Nevertheless, in true Raider spirit, Morgan is going to show up. He's going to get his artillery planted on top of a hill and start bombarding the Federal positions in front of him. And then after that initial bombardment and pushing in the skirmishers, he's going, of course, demand the surrender of the Federals there. You can actually see the surrender field there on the battlefield today. But nevertheless, Moore is honestly going to give one of the coolest replies, I think, that I've been able to read for a while. And I'll actually read you the quote. It says, "Present my compliments to General Morgan and say to him that this day being the 4th day of July, I cannot entertain his proposition." I don't know how much more cooler you can get than that.
Yep.
I mean, that just initially tells you, like, come and get some.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just really cool. But after that initial bombardment, that is when Morgan is going to decide to throw his men into this attack. And this attack is going to start off with some really bad odds for the Confederates, even though they outnumber the Federals from roughly about 4 to 5, give or take. As we kind of know, Morgan had a lot more men getting into this attack. He had anywhere between 800 to 1,000 or so Confederates getting into this attack compared to Moore, who has, about 200 or so guys. And mind you, Moore does not have everybody online when this attack initially starts out. There's actually about 40 men from Company E under Benjamin Travis, a lieutenant, by the Green River Bridge, where Hogan's troops from the Ninth Corps are actually dug in and along the Green River Bluff along there. And I believe, as far as what those earthworks looked like, I don't know 100%, but nevertheless, after the initial stages of that event is going to go on, Morgan is going to get out his plan of attack. So on his right, he's going to commit the 7th Kentucky Cavalry, which has an interesting contingent of Texans, Tennesseans, and Kentuckians. And then in the center, he'll have the 5th Kentucky Cavalry. And then on the left of his line, he's going to have the famous 11th Kentucky Cavalry. And I say that because you have David W. Chenault commanding that regiment, and he is genuinely, if you're going to look at him, I always imagined him like Claiborne. The guys love him. The soldiers love him. He's a good commander. He knows what he's doing. Um, he's just a good commander to be around. And that's just, that is going to speak volumes, especially as this attack kicks up. But also with the 7th Kentucky Cavalry, you also have Jake Bennett's company of the 10th Kentucky Partisan Rangers, who's going to play a vital role in this attack as it's going to start opening up. Nevertheless, Morgan's men are going to rush towards the rifle pits because that's what they see at first. And they're going to, sustain some kind of losses, but they're actually going to be able to push the Federals away from the rifle pits, which is what Moore wanted. He wanted them to become very invested into the attack. And unfortunately, that is what's going to just waylay these Confederates as they're coming in. The interesting thing, I talked about the odds against the Confederates. The one thing that is going to be plaguing this Confederate command, among many things, is the ammunition. That's something that we've kind of always talked about. The ammunition of these Confederate raiders going into this, a lot of the troops only have anywhere between 5 to 7 rounds of ammunition, and this fight does not last, a short while. It lasts for a good little bit. It is. No, and if you look into the accounts, a lot of Morgan's officers are even hesitant to make this attack because these guys don't have the ammunition. These Federals are dug in. It seems like they're going to want to fight. The odds don't look good for them, and so, but nevertheless, this attack opens up, and it is just brutal. The Confederates try to launch numerous attacks upon the Federal breastworks, and it is just deathly. Soldiers are dropping left and right. They're trying to maintain fire in these abastae, in this thicket. There's tons of accounts of them trying everything possible to get over the walls over there. I believe at one point they even tried to burn the breastworks to try to get the Federals to come out, but it didn't work any at all. And there's just wave after wave after wave. But nevertheless, some of these attacks, they get pretty nasty. At one point towards the end of the assaults that they're trying to launch upon the Federal line, Jake Bennett's company is able to try to swing around the Green River Bluff and start enfilading the Federal lines. That is Moore's left, that is Morgan's right, just to try to keep you on there. And Jake Bennett's men are able to kind of throw them away from the breastworks, but the Federals in that particular line actually fix bayonets and charge and fire back at Jake Bennett's men. And some of his men actually fall all the way down into the Green River down below. And that is a steep drop if you've ever been at the battle, and it throws them back. And so after numerous charges, Morgan is going to try his best to flank these Federals one last time, and that is when he's going to use David W. Chenault's 11th Kentucky. This is one of the largest regiments in this outfit, and he's going to give Chenault this task. And so Chenault is going to go down, if you remember, on the left of the Confederate side, the right on the Federals. They're going to get down the bluff on the land side, and that is where Chenault is going to order his men to charge up this entire bluff. And it is a steep climb, but these Confederates are coming through there. And one of the Federal accounts said that they looked like locusts as they were moving through the trees. At that point in time, Moore, who is just holding on for dear life, is using every trick that he possibly can. He'll actually hold a portion of the Company I that is part of the 25th Michigan there. I usually like to call them the Flying Dutchmen. Mind you, they were never called the Flying Dutchmen ever in the Civil War, as far as I can mind. But nevertheless, they're commanded by Captain DeBow, who's a Mexican war vet. DeBow will order his men to fix bayonets. They will throw them out along the roadside there in their breastworks, of course. But they are actually going to be positioned as a skirmish line, which is just insane to me to think. I mean, if you just can imagine spread out troops to the very thinnest that they possibly can be to try to, stop this Federal advance of several hundred men deep coming up this bluff. And they wait until they get into pistol shot range, which I mean is deathly close for infield rifles, which a lot of these guys have on them, the Federals, that is. And whenever they get into pistol shot range, DeBow will order his men to let loose everything that they've got, and it just blunts this Confederate assault. At one point during the charge, Chenault is trying to urge his men to try to break into the Federal lines here because they can almost break it. You can just feel them almost breaking, and out of nowhere, Chenault is going to be shot directly right into the forehead, and it just stuns the men. The guy that they look up to, the guy that they respect, is just killed like that right in front of them, and it stumbles them. You have a couple of captains that try to keep the charge going, but they're going to get shot immediately right in front of the breastworks. And then you have a couple of officers like Major Brent from the 5th Kentucky, who starts to see that this attack is starting to fail. And so he's trying to ride over to where the 11th Kentucky is. He's immediately killed. And so this attack just flounders. Helping this in situation at this very apex of the attack is the fact that a Sergeant Merle from the 25th Michigan is actually going to be captured by Kluge's men a couple hours before this attack really starts to get open. He was actually sick that day. He was presumably at the Sublet House. As soon as he hears the fighting going on, he's going to rush towards the bridge. First, he goes to the camp. He doesn't find his troops there. Then he tries to go to the bridge, and he's actually captured by Kluge's men. And then he's going to be sent over to Morgan's, position, and he's going to tell Morgan, we have this X amount of troops, and we're going to have these reinforcements showing up. It's artillery, cavalry, everything. And of course, Morgan's like, okay, this guy's clearly bluffing. But then one of the big tricks that Moore is able to pull out of this entire thing is that, those Dutchmen that are in his regiment don't really speak English. And so he actually trains them by bugle when and where to move. And that actually helps, because one of the things he tries to tell his troops is that, when I do this, you got to scream out reinforcements or something. And so as this attack is starting to kick up and it's almost breaking the Federal lines, he's going to call out for reinforcements to come in. And that is when Company E, that little contingent that was along the river underneath Travis, is going to rush towards the main fight. And that's when all those troops along that line start screaming out, reinforcements, reinforcements. And they, the bugle count is clearly distinct. And so at that moment, Morgan realizes that the game is up. That he thinks now, okay, this account was clearly real. And so he decides thereafter to slowly but surely start pulling his men off and peeling away. Now, if you remember earlier, I kind of mentioned the fact that Morgan had sent a flanking maneuver around the Tebbs Bend area to where Hogan's men were at along the Green River Bridge. Now, Hogan's troops again are along the Green River Bridge bluffs. And as far as what their disposition is, I'm not 100% sure. I'm not going to tell you that they erected earthworks. Some of them could have been behind trees. Some of them could have erected breastworks. It's not really 100% known. All we do know is that they are in a great position. And the one thing I like to tell people on my tours, especially during this, is that, Hogan's men, these 79th York Highlanders and the 8th Michigan, were at the Battle of Antietam near Burnside's Bridge. And I think this is something that they clearly had to have remembered. Now the roles are reversed, that we're defending the bridge and the Confederates are going to be attacking us. And Hogan's troops are in a really good position. Beyond the bridge facing going north towards Campbellsville, that entire field area had been cut down from a lot of the trees that were along the Green River banks to try to help erect this bridge up. And so they had a great field of fire. They were very well concealed. And Hogan is a veteran, of course. A lot of these guys are veterans, so they know what they're doing. Nevertheless, Kluge, who's the Confederate, who's on the opposite side, remember, he is on the side that's going towards Campbellsville, so towards the north. He hears the firing stopping. And again, that exterior line of communication, he doesn't know that Morgan is pulling off from the main fight. And as a result, Kluge thinks, hey, we've got him. Let's rush him. And so they immediately start rushing towards the Green River Ford, which is right next to the bridge, as well as the bridge itself. They rush towards it. As soon as he starts getting close to that bridge, Hogan's men start popping off, just right off of him, and they're able to kill a couple of guys. How many? It's really truly unknown. I'm not going to give you a figure because I don't know 100%. But as soon as Kluk starts taking fire, he's like, "Hey, wait a second, what's going on here?" And then that's when he starts getting word from Morgan that, "Hey, we're pulling back. We're going to go around Tebbs Bend now and just go towards Campbellsville." And that's when Kluk is going to start peeling back his troops, and subsequently by about, I would surmise, about 10:30 or so, that is when the fighting at Tebbs Bend slowly subsides.
So you touched on some things here that I think, we are making fun, of course, of the gigantic size and the overimportance of Tebbs Bend that overshadows Gettysburg and Vicksburg. But in all seriousness,
is it true?
Right? It is true. But in all seriousness, you've described a situation for Morgan's command. This is just a few days into the raid, and he's already losing some senior officers. So, what is your opinion then? What kind of an impact will that have on the rest of this raid?
I would argue, and Betty Jane Gordon laid this out perfectly well, that this has a great impact on the rest of this raid. One of the things that happens at Tebbs Bend, if you're going to, mark it distinctly against all the other battles that happen in this great raid, and they're all fascinating battles, but I think it's at this one that Morgan loses some of those senior commanders that had been with him for a while. You name, Chenault. Chenault has been with him for a good hot second. He is a good, excellent raider. He knows what he's doing. He knows his men, and he knows how to push them. And where I think it hits Morgan the hardest is those low officers, those captains, those lieutenants, those guys that know the men on a more personal level, that have been in tough situations, that know how to command their troops. He loses a lot of them. And I think you see that as the raid progresses. And that's something that I think a lot of people forget, is that when you start losing great officers, that's going to affect the chain of command. That's going to affect how your troops fight in a lot of battles, in a lot of ways. And it's not just at Tebbs Bend. I mean, Darryl, I know you did a lot of work on the 1864 raid that he has. And, you can kind of see the differences in how his troops perform, how they attack. It's an effect that just does not leave Morgan's command.
Right.
It is one that stings right where it's supposed to.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree, because you look at the officer pool too that he loses all throughout the entire raid, because he's going to have some issues the next day at Lebanon, obviously losing a brother there.
Exactly.
But this continues on, right? He's, as you've already alluded to, he will lose 2 of his commanders of the advanced guard, or whatever you'd like to call it, whatever fancy term you'd like to call it. The first one being extremely effective and extremely experienced. But then also the officer pool that he will lose on the Great Raid as they surrender at or after Buffington Island and finally up at Slingville. So this, this kind of, the importance of Tebbs Bend might not be the size of the battle. It may portend to the outcome of this raid, in all seriousness. I'm, personally, after July 4th, his butt probably should have turned around. But and for a lot of reasons. I mean, we all know he defies 2 orders on this raid as it is. So there's that aspect of it. So
I mean, it's like going forward from there after expending all that ammunition for nothing. I mean, they didn't capture anything. That's, to me, that's wild. I mean, I don't know what they get the next day at Lebanon, however it's how is it pronounced?
Lebanon.
Lebanon. Lebanon, if it's Ohio.
Lebanon. Okay.
Lebanon. I like that.
Western Kentucky, I don't make it out that way very often. Lebanon. All right. So is that one reason why he goes straight for Lebanon the next day, is to try to replenish some of this stuff and to try to swing the direction of this raid, maybe?
Well, that's getting into what's Morgan thinking, and I mean, I don't know what he's thinking at that point.
I don't think we can answer that question.
That is a hard question. Genuinely, I don't know. I mean, it's really hard, and he doesn't. I mean, you could say he secured a victory at Lebanon because he captures the garrison there, but that is a victory, I think, in name only. I mean, they sustain blood numbers. They lose a lot more guys
Absolutely.
there than they shouldn't
Yeah.
have, and it's a street fight. Um, and Darryl, you were right. I mean, he lost a brother for pizza, and like at that point, how it's not really good when a couple days into the raid, you've just sustained a lot of losses, you've lost a lot of troops. Strategically, what have you gained? You've not hit the Louisville and Nashville Railroad in a timely manner that you should be hitting.
Mhm.
Um, it
Didn't get
just
that
it's
bridge burned
it's
either.
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. He doesn't get the
And,
bridge.
yeah, and he doesn't strike the LNN until, I mean, Tebbs Bend and Lebanon are not the LNN, right? I mean, there's
No,
Lebanon Junction. There's
no.
a side spur that comes into Lebanon, but it's not the LNN. So it's like,
Hmm.
what's his plan at this particular point? Again, we could speculate that.
Yeah,
That's a 3 hour episode, right? So
that is one that takes a lot of philosophy to come out to try to figure out.
absolutely.
Um, but exactly. So,
Again,
but,
just some questions for you. I mean, I've obviously been to
hmm
Tubbs Bend 3 or 4 times
hmm
now, I guess. The first time I
hmm
went down was my wife and I. We stopped in, and it was just this beautiful sunny day. It was probably in the 70s. It was breezy, and
hmm
we were super impressed with what has the interpretation, the driving
hmm
tours. Tell us a little bit about if a visitor goes to Tubbs Bend, what can they expect to see?
So the great thing about Tebsman is, you thank you for that. I mean, the Tebsman Battlefield Association works really, really hard to try to make that, just a special place to try to go and visit. If you're going to come visit to Tebsman, I would certainly suggest go look on our Facebook page. We've got tons of videos, tons of good social media posts about the history of the battle, troops that were there. But as far as going to see the battlefield, there is, a couple miles of walking trails. It's actually a nature preserve. A lot of it is where, if you want to know who was there, that is where that particular nature preserve is where Kluk's men come around to flank. That's where a little bit of Camp Hobson was. Troops from the Ninth Corps camped. So you got some history there, but it's a really beautiful nature preserve. Again, good couple of miles. It's just really beautiful. I love going to see that all the time. You have, if you're going to be seeing there, you're also going to be seeing the Sublet House, which after the battle was used as a
Mhm.
hospital for the federal troops that were there. And the Tebsman Battlefield Association is working very diligently trying to preserve that structure. It's one of the few, I think it's actually one of the only remaining structures from the battle to still be on the battlefield. You still have the Atkinson Griffiths house that is still tied to Tebsman, but it's not there on the battlefield. But that sublet house is still there. And if you're interested in helping out with those preservation efforts, definitely reach out to the association, get on that Facebook page. They're always trying to get some more funds to try to help preserve that
Mhm.
history. And it's a history that just doesn't span Tebbs Bend's, July 4th, 1863 raid. It spans the Civil War. A family lived there, sublets. The sublets still own the very land that encompassed that property. So, I mean, it is history that is still there and it's still alive. Beyond that, there is a driving tour that you can kind of come and see. There's brochures there at the toll gate house that you can try to go get to give this good experience. And the driving tour is very well organized. You can kind of flow in whichever direction you want to. If you want to come the way that the Confederates did, you can do that. If you want to see the Federal positions, you can do that. It's just a really good tour. Beyond that, we do have also the Confederate cemetery that is out there as well, that you can go see as well. And it also talks about the Federal casualties that were sustained there as well.
Yeah, it's definitely worth a couple-hour visit. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
Even for those who are casual, and it's just a few minutes south of Campbellsville, right
Mm-hmm.
along
Yeah.
55, right along Route 55.
I think it's 55. I
I think
believe
it's
you're right.
55. So it's
Something like that.
Green
Yeah.
River Lake area. Is that right?
That's right.
Yeah.
It's so yeah. If you're going to come boating,
Yeah.
the one thing I always try to tell people is like, hey, whenever family vacations go on, they usually try to cater to everybody. I know my family did. So if you're trying to go boating, there's a Civil War park that can either, get that bug for whoever the historian is in the family. It's just right off the lake. It's not too far away.
And Campbellsville has got a cool little downtown that seems to be on a revitalization path.
It is, yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't know if they still do it, but I think once a week they used to, at least during the summertime. I know last year they, if you have a nice historic car, you can come down. I mean, I wasn't born in the '80s, but apparently that place was a hopping place to take your car, play some music, and apparently they're trying to bring it back. So,
For some reason, I thought you were older than I was. I guess I get it all wrong.
yeah,
I have that all backwards,
yeah.
I guess. So, but yeah, I mean, it's worth it. And I'll make this
Hmm.
comment, kind of the outsider, right? The Tebbs
Hmm.
Bend Battlefield Association. This is a truly we have several of these in Kentucky. That's truly like a
Hmm.
grassroots organization, right? You've
Hmm.
got local folks really trying to do good work. They
Hmm.
may not expand, they may not cast their net probably as wide as they could, but at the same point, it's like a passionate group, right? So if folks
Hmm.
who join your association or just donate, just know that your dollars are like directly impacting that area.
It
Yeah.
is. I mean, one thing that the Tebbs Bend Battle Association always does is in October we normally host a night ride, which it'll be on Facebook when that starts kicking up. It's in October, about mid-October. Um, a really good time. You get you pay a little bit of a fee, but you get a nice night ride on it, some hay bales. There's some fun activities that go on, and then you get some good homemade soups. And I don't know about you, but when you get some good homemade soups from some really talented cookers, I don't know, it seems like it's really worth it. Maybe I'm biased, I don't know, but that big effort during the night ride, I mean, if you want to talk about an impact, that is one way that you can help impact it, even if you don't even come, just buying a ticket or even donating money
Mhm.
then. I mean, that really helps sustain a lot of the preservation efforts, what they can do for the rest of the year. I mean, it is such a very big event. And Daryl, you're right. I mean, it is one of those that if you give them money, they are going to be spending it into the battlefield. It's going into the battlefield regardless. It doesn't matter what it is. It is for the
Yeah,
battlefield.
absolutely. It's not necessarily, I mean, you talk about the nature preserve, and that's obviously a preserved
Hmm.
area. The rest of the
Hmm.
tour isn't necessarily preserved, but there are numerous stops along the way. So
Hmm.
you're using the old original Green River Road, or I guess whatever it's called.
Hmm.
And so you're following that, but you have all these interpretive
Hmm.
panels along the way. And so that makes it,
Hmm.
it's just a really well thought out, laid out tour, as well as the area that's preserved down there by the toll gate house. It's a good site.
Yeah.
It's not the original bridge, obviously, but it's an old bridge that's even been moved from
Right.
over the river, that you actually can walk right through that too. So it's just a very cool
That's right.
site. Books. We alluded to Mrs. Gorin's book already, a little bit,
Hmm.
but talk about a couple books that you might recommend for Tebbs Bend area, and or maybe even
Hmm.
just Great Rate.
Yeah. Betty Jane Gorin, I really and truly believe that if it hadn't been for her, the story of understanding Tibbs Bend could have never happened. I mean, she is, you want to talk about a shaker, she's got it. I mean, this book is really good. If you want to understand the Tebbs Bend region, even though it's just a very, uh, you know, very specialized area, just a lot of fascinating human interest stories there. And it gives a great detail about the Battle of Tebbs Bend. It is such a good book, and it just doesn't stop at the battle. It talks about all the other things that are going on in that region, from guerrillas that were operating there to Lions Raid. You name it, it is just a really good source of understanding what happens there and the strategic implications. Um, and then as far as the Great Raid itself, I know there's a lot of good books out there. I'm trying to think of the name of the book. Daryl, you might be able to help me. I can see his face right now. He talks about the entire raid into
Yeah.
its conclusion
Yeah,
into
there's a couple of
Ohio.
them that actually do that. The more recent one is Dave Mowry's book, The Great Raid, and that's a history press book, and he's covering the entire raid, and it's excellent because there's 25 maps in that book. Like, they're
Hmm.
really well done,
Man.
and he covers it very well. A
Hmm.
groundbreaking effort was a couple decades before that would be oh geez, what's his name now? Lester Horwitz, The Longest Raid
Oh,
of the Civil War. And you can find that on
that's right.
aftermarket all over the place. It gets to be really repetitious because he talks a lot about the claims records after the war, but that was also very good research because then you can really map the direction that Morgan's men were taking, particularly in Indiana, Ohio, getting those claims that were issued or sent to those respective state governments. So those are a couple right there. And then, of course, you got the Morgan bio, right? That's not necessarily it's related
Hmm.
to one thing or another, but I think the Morgan bio by Dr. Amage which is like 1986, University of Kentucky Press, 96 or 86. I want to say it's 86. It's still, to me, the best bio in terms of balance that's out there on Morgan. But back to Betty's book, it's like a Taylor County in the Civil War. That's kind of right, Taylor County area, right, and the region, right. So there's a focus on Tebbs Bend, obviously, but it covers the entire war. And similarly, there's another great book on Harrison County, Kentucky, which covers the first and last Kentucky raids by Bill Penn. And to me, these are very similar style, right? We're talking about not just these salient points, but also just the history of what's going on related to the Civil War. So it's great stuff. So Betty's book is, you have to kind of find that one on Aftermarket, and it can be pricey now, right?
That's right. It's like the Fountain of Youth. You got to find it if you can.
Right? I know she had talked at one point about maybe having it republished or reprinted, and hopefully someday that actually happens, because it is becoming a little pricier. So it's still definitely it's worth going out there and searching for if you want to study Great Raid, and particularly Tebbs Bend and that surrounding region. So good stuff there.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I'm not for sure, because my dog decided, when I had to step away there for a second, my 13-year-old deaf dog decided that was the moment she needed to go outside. So I don't know what I missed.
Well, we talked about you. That's what we did. So
yeah, the entire time.
I was wanting to talk about my guy, Adam Johnson here. Did y'all happen to talk about him?
Who?
I've never heard of this guy. He's a nobody, right?
Didn't he like lose a toe at some side? No, that's not him.
No,
it's not him. Okay.
Yeah. Well,
well, I just wanted to bring him up because he is commanding one of Morgan's brigades here, and when I'm looking here in his memoir, which this is written decades after the war, so this could be a little bit of some Monday morning quarterbacking going on. But this is what he had to say that he wrote about this, several years later. He said, I lost my spot. Okay. He said the distance between the ravine and the bluff was not more than 150 yards, and was so well and skillfully fortified that I deemed it impregnable against my dismounted cavalry, but believed we might use our artillery so as to induce a surrender. And then he goes on to say, General Morgan joined me and gave orders not to use the artillery, and sent in the summons to the surrender, which we talked about that earlier. But then he goes on to say, Morgan immediately ordered me to take the remnant of my brigade left on that side of the river, about 400 strong, and storm the stronghold. I begged the general not to attempt it, as I had but 7 rounds of ammunition, and we could easily flank the place. But he insisted, and I led my men to the charge. By the time we reached the abattis, however you say that word, our ammunition was exhausted, and about 50 of my men were killed and wounded, including the brave Colonel Chenault. Duke's charge on my right met a similar fate, he losing the gallant Brent and other valuable officers and men. Had the enemy's force in our rear used ordinary diligence, they could have given us trouble at this place. And that's really about all he says about it. And this is one of the parts that, really, these 2 pages in his memoir make me think that Johnson was starting to realize what Morgan was and what Morgan was not. Because on the following page, he goes on and is talking about when they're crossing the Ohio River. And they had this understanding that once they got to the river, Morgan was going to take whoever he wanted in Indiana, Ohio. Johnson was going to be allowed to go to the west, back to his old department, kind of the Green River area there along the Ohio River, which where he was in 1862, and just wreak havoc again like he had, and take 2 guns with him this time, which would have been a big upgrade. But as soon as they cross the river, he's told, hey, Morgan wants to talk to you. So he goes and talks to him and says, yeah, you're not going that way now. You're coming with me. And hey, we had this agreement. No, don't do this to me. And he's like, well, too late. The boats are burning. And it's kind of like one of those Cortez moments, when he lands in Mexico to go after the Aztecs. It's like, there ain't no going back now. You're stuck. And Morgan or Johnson goes on to say something like, it's like a groom not getting to see the bride on the wedding day or something like that. That's how he felt. And so I'm thinking, I think Johnson's starting to realize Morgan is not all cut out to what he's made himself to be and what
Mhm.
other people have made him out to be by
Mm.
1863 here.
Mhm. I agree with that. And I feel like Johnson, in a way, kind of. I've always imagined him as the father that he was for that brigade. He's gonna let the little child Morgan run around, do whatever he does. But whenever stuff hits the fan, you kind of see Johnson, especially at Buffington Island, take as much control that he can in that chaos and get
Yep.
troops across the Ohio River, as many as he can. Even though it was a difficult crossing, but I mean, he just kind of takes the reins and it's like, okay, get out as much as we possibly can and get across with what we've got.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
That's
you've also mentioned you read that there in Johnson's memoirs, which we know we can be careful with, and you alluded to this
mhm.
earlier, um, Taylor, about Morgan's been only having a handful of rounds. Now we know Rankin Johnson mentions that, and God knows what axe he had to grind. What other sources are indicating that this is super early in the raid, and this division
Hmm.
was equipped and ready to fight. So why are they only carrying six or
Hmm.
seven rounds? Is this a misnomer?
Yeah. No, it's not a misnomer. So you kind of have to look at it from multiple layers. So by the spring and summer of 1863, the Confederate cavalry arm, especially in the Army of Tennessee, is trying to transition to what essentially I would term basically just a mounted
Uh-huh.
infantry unit. They're not really carrying cavalry weapons. They're not carrying carbines. They're not carrying uh, everything that you would imagine. And there's some plus and there's some negative sides to that. Whenever Morgan is launching this raid, he's of course hitting some cavalry, or not some cavalry units, but some infantry units, but that's very sporadically. But it's not to the level that he needs to sustain the fights that he's getting into, especially these skirmishes, where some troops get engaged heavily and some troops aren't. That's kind of adding into a layer of that where he's not able to capture those, and it's also his supply wagons. They're not keeping up as fast as they possibly can with Morgan's troops. It just kind of becomes one of those situations. But I think it's the fact um, that his men aren't engaging and winning against federal infantry that they're coming up against in some cases, especially like at Tebbs Bend. Had they succeeded, undoubtedly they would have gotten a lot more ammunition in their cartridge boxes. Clearly that is something that's plaguing his guys as they're continuing through this raid.
Yeah, I think that area begs for some more research because he's already functioning as
Hmm.
mounted infantry in 1862, and they're already using
Hmm.
the short band infield when they can get it in 62.
Hmm.
And for
Hmm.
him to launch a raid with a handful of rounds in each cartridge box, it doesn't make a whole lot of. I mean, just a logical sense, right? I know
Yeah,
there's a
yeah.
very small skirmish at Marrowbone. You already alluded to the little skirmish at Columbia,
Hmm.
but you're not shooting up hundreds or thousands of rounds for gain in
No.
those actions. And it's not his entire division that's engaged at Tebbs Bend.
Hmm.
And he goes on to fight at Lebanon. Then there's some skirmishing goes. My point would be he would have absolutely zero rounds by the time he got to Buffington Island. And we know they were low on
Hmm.
ammunition. They suck
Hmm.
rounds. And to your point, they're also not re equipping very effectively. Um,
Hmm.
or what they do capture, like Corydon, perfect example. A lot of those guys are
Hmm.
not carrying 5.77 Enfield rounds, right? So a lot of those
Hmm.
guys are carrying like Austrian stuff, or well, some of them had Henrys, believe it or not. So it's
Mhm.
like that. The ammunition conversation that might be one to dig into a little deeper,
I think so too.
right? That's interesting because
Hmm.
it just doesn't make sense. Now again, we can talk about Morgan's psyche a little bit, but that
Hmm.
makes no sense to me whatsoever, right? I can understand the artillery by the time
Hmm.
Buffington Island happens because they had been
Hmm.
engaged at Lebanon. They are
Hmm.
shelling the gunboats overlooking Brandenburg, and so that makes sense. A
Hmm.
little bit of Corydon, so that makes sense to me that those guys are low on ammunition. But
Hmm.
the mounted infantry, that's a little
Hmm.
yeah, little deeper look.
I think another conversation that kind of needs to be open is the after effects after this great raid. I think something a lot of people don't talk about is the explosion of guerrilla activity that occurs across the Commonwealth after Morgan's guys slip past. I mean, It you can look at the newspapers, and July is all about Morgan, yada yada yada. But then when you get into August and September, as the Knoxville campaign starts kicking up, there's just an explosion. If you just read all those newspaper accounts of guys from Morgan's command who have either been wounded, straggled off, starting to form guerrilla bands, and taking hold of the chaos that's just happening in Kentucky at that point in time. And that's, I think, if you're going to talk about what is the biggest after effect of the Great Raid, I would pinpoint it as that. That is something that plagues Kentucky for the rest of the war. Mind you, they had guerrilla warfare before them, but you just don't see how it explodes until after the Great Raid comes through.
And it starts then, no doubt about it. And then really, I mean,
Mhm.
it intensifies in 64. And again, there's those
Mhm.
other raids that take place, Morgan's last raid, et cetera, where
Mhm.
these guys don't go back with him. They're scattered to the
Mhm.
4 points of the compass. And next thing you know, they're
Mhm.
leading guerrilla bands or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
And, some of those guerrillas in 63, they're deserters, right? They don't want to cross the Ohio
Mhm.
River. They don't want to keep going north. This is an opportunity to do whatever I want to do, and
Mhm.
kind of go from there. So interesting to say, yeah, that's a good point. I know Derrick touches on that in some of his talks and maybe a book. I don't know, some book. So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
maybe.
yeah, some,
I might
yeah,
skim some
yeah.
things, uh, but you're mentioning Jake Bennett earlier, a captain in the 10th Kentucky. Um, he is going to be one of those guys come late 1864, back in the western part of the state. I don't want to say he's a full-fledged guerrilla, but he's still waving around on a Confederate officer thing. But he's doing some guerrilla stuff.
Mhm.
He comes back to Owensboro and uh, pretty much his men, not a big group, but they pretty much robbed the place.
Mhm.
There's not a lot there for him to grab, and whenever they're told, yeah, there's hey, don't take our stuff, but there's this little boat down on the wharf there that you might be interested in. Instead, and says, okay, and so he goes down there and he finds some men, some USCT soldiers.
Mhm. That's right.
Those men are shot on sight, and some of them are inside the boat when it's set on fire.
Mhm.
And a couple of them, burned to death. I can't remember the exact number. A few of them were rescued by the people once Bennett's men get out of there.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's just kind of one of those atrocities that Bennett, if he was wanting to say he was a Confederate officer at that point in the war, treat me as such. His actions certainly did
Mhm.
not show it.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's one of those the offshoots from Morgan's adventures into Kentucky.
Hmm.
I think it creates these sorts
Hmm.
of things, or
Mhm.
created
We
these sorts
talked
of things.
recently with Steve Fong because he was trying to reach out to find a particular name for somebody to inquire, and it's
Mhm.
Jesse, Captain, what was his name? George Jesse, I think is his name. And he ends up
Yes, George M. Jesse.
the
Yeah.
1864 raid, and he doesn't go back. He stays in Kentucky, and then
Mhm.
next thing you know, he's
Mhm.
slaughtering USCI troops along the Ohio River between Cincinnati and Louisville. Right, it's the same thing, right?
Mhm.
It's the same kind of
Mhm.
process. So, well, good stuff there. Anything else we want to say about the most important battle of July of 1863?
Other than the fact that it's the turning point of the war, undoubtedly,
You stress it pretty much. I
I
like
Battle
it.
would
that doomed the
Yeah,
Confederacy.
yeah, I like it.
yes, I would say the thing that Tebbs Bend is, if you come there, it is just a great place if you just want to learn a little bit about Civil War
Uh-huh.
history. Um, and I think, if you are just getting into the Civil War, if you are kind of dipping your toes into the water, I think, it's one of many great places to go and try and visit. It has so much story, so many human interest stories. It's not just a battle. There were people that were living there. There are tons of stories of soldiers interacting with civilians. There's just tons of great human interest stories there. And I would implore anybody that's listening to the podcast to go out there and go see
Uh-huh.
it.
Yeah.
It is just a beautiful sight, and it's it is not monument heavy in any regard. So I mean, if you were one of those that doesn't like to get into the monuments and stuff like that, it is a battlefield that is relatively looking like what it did beyond the houses that are around there. But it's just a beautiful sight. It is just one of those, and it's just wonderful to go visit. So I would implore anybody to try to go do it.
Yeah, I
Yeah, definitely.
concur.
Back in 2021, that was the first tour that Western Theater and Civil War
That is
did.
right. That is
Yeah,
right.
And we did the hay bale ride, and man, that was a great afternoon.
It was fun.
It was.
That was fun. That was good stuff.
Um,
Well, we have talking about events, right? This is timely. We got something coming up in
that's right.
October. We'd like to remind folks on this podcast that when we have the symposium on the field, we have an opportunity to talk about it. So we have our fourth annual symposium on the field. It seems to get a little larger every year. We already have something like 25 folks already signed up for it.
That's
We'd love
good.
to get up to like 70, 800, 4,000. No, okay, we might be stretching that a little
That's
bit
right.
longer.
That's right.
But we have some tentative plans in. It starts on Friday, October 17th. I think I have that right.
Yep.
We're going to kick it off Friday at 4:30. Then we'll have some tours, obviously, on Saturday morning. We have our lunch on your own. And then we always have a tour in the afternoon on Saturday. And then the evening soiree at the Bottom House, which gives you an opportunity to get inside the historic Bottom House, hosted by our friends at the Perryville Battlefield, or friends of Perryville Battlefield. And then Sunday, we usually have a morning tour as well. And I'll give you a few items that are happening. It looks like right now on Friday, I'm going to do Bushrod Johnson's Brigade. We won't be walking a lot, that's for sure, because Bushrod doesn't get very far. But we'll meet at the Bottom House, and then we'll do a little walking. We'll be focused mostly around the Bottom House for that one. Saturday, the next morning, and we kick off at 9 a.m. And Derrick is going to take us he's going to follow. We're going to follow him on Sterling Alexander Martin Wood's Confederate Brigade and their movements and their activities. Not a brigade that's studied very often at Perryville. It seems like seems like that in general, there's certain brigades or even units that are the popular ones or the ones that are talked about a lot. That's another reason why we decided to do symposium, is to break these things down.
Yep.
Right after that, at 11 o'clock, Taylor, we have you listed to do Jones's Brigade, and that'll be probably the hilliest walk of the weekend, most likely.
Yeah, that will be all right. It will be.
So this is Jones's Mississippians, as they are coming up from the Doctor's Creek area, climbing over one ridge and trying to assault, and then eventually taking. No, that's Brown. Never mind. Jones's boys that try to take Loomis's Heights. We'll cover that. Lunch, as I mentioned, is on your own, so it'll be about 1 o'clock. There are a couple of restaurants now in Perryville. And Derrick and I talked about this last time. We seem to gravitate towards the Mexican joint 2 or 3 times for that weekend. And then
That's
afterwards, we're going to do something a little different this year, and we're going to do kind of like a co-led tour. So the tour hosts are going to have to break this down a little bit. We're going to do artillery on the field, and I put part 1 because maybe next year we'll do another part or something along those lines.
Yeah.
And so we're going to focus on the Federal and Confederate batteries involved, mostly focused on Loomis Heights. So we will meet at the Dye House, which is allegedly Buckner's headquarters, but I'm not really sure how much time he really spent there. Which is as you're driving up Battlefield Road and you're heading towards the main park, the Dye House is, I don't know, half a mile or so south of that.
Yeah, there
It has that.
Yeah, it's big old
White House on the left.
You cannot miss it. Yeah.
There's plenty of parking there. So we'll walk to 2 Confederate artillery positions from that point. Darden, and I can't think of the other one off the top of my head, which is terrible. But we'll hit a couple of spots there, and then we'll get back in the vehicles and we'll drive probably up to Loomis Heights area and park there. And we'll cover some of the Union artillery batteries. We might hit Calvert a little bit too, and talk maybe even about Slocum's 5th Company of Washington Artillery. And so we're just going to try to focus on that because artillery, if it's on the field proper, yes, we talk about it. But all those positions that are farther out, there are a couple of other Confederate positions that are on the east side of Battlefield Road. There's just not enough parking down there. That's a problem. Used to be the trails used to connect them all, so we could have done one large Confederate artillery battery tour, but the trails don't connect any longer, and I don't want people walking along Battlefield Road to get down to that trailhead. That's not safe. So we'll have to figure out something in the future, but at least we're going to do part 1. Yep. So we'll break that down a little bit. We'll probably each pick like a battery and talk about them from there. That's a lot of talk for me. Sorry about that. And then again, 5:30 at the Bottom House. We'll do the evening meet and greet. The friends always put out a great spread for us. And Dan Masters is going to talk. He's going to give us a talk on the impact of the Kentucky campaign in Perryville on the rest of the war. And then we still have an opening right now at Sunday, 10 a.m., but we are talking to Jamie Gillum, who did an interesting and thought provoking. I thought well done. Donaldson brigade tour last year. He mentioned he wanted to do Stewart's Brigade, another one of those brigades that really doesn't get talked about, except it takes the second highest percentage of casualties for Confederate brigade at the battle, or it's one of the top two or three, and it never really gets focused on, right? So he's going to focus on that. Hopefully that comes to fruition. So that would be our symposium, October 17th through 19th. It is completely free. Except, well, obviously gas, food, lodging are all on your own, but the tours themselves are completely free. They last about 90 minutes each or so.
Yeah.
And then we kind of go from there. We'd love to have everybody come out. I think it's a great opportunity for the park to see people using the park for battlefield study. And so I think that's an important thing. And we could not do this without the Friends of Perryville Battlefield. So I want to thank them.
Exactly.
You guys want to add anything about the symposium?
Let's say I would say about my tour. It's been very fascinating to kind of read up on Jones's Brigade, and I would tell anybody that'll be going on to that specific tour to kind of be surprised about a little bit more about maybe some of the misconceptions and even myths about Jones's Brigade.
Yeah, the addition of the two Sasquatch engineers on Jones's Brigade never gets talked about, so I'm looking forward to that one. So
Can't wait.
I had to do it. All right, Derek. What about Mr. Sterling Alexander Martin Wood?
Yeah. His attack is right up there by the Russell House. That's kind of what he's gunning for. Last year when I did Liddell's brigade, basically the same general area. Liddell came in after Wood, so that kind of gives you a little bit of hint of how Wood's afternoon finishes there. But yeah, it's not a large brigade, but they do some heavy fighting, and so I'm looking forward to getting into that, and I'm just excited. This is the fourth year we've done this.
Oh,
And
yeah.
we still are hitting things that haven't been talked about yet.
There are several topics, right? Because we focus mostly on a brigade level, but that doesn't mean we have to keep focusing on a brigade level, right? I mean, there are individual regiments and other things that are going on there. You can talk about command decisions and acoustic shadow my ass and all that good stuff, right? I had to do it. We can also try to, that might be a little more difficult. We could spend a little time down by Buell's headquarters, just a smidge, right? Because there's a side road there, which would be ideal for parking. We can talk a little bit about acoustic shadow and the Buell Commission and all those things, and maybe incorporate that with another, I don't know, something else, right? Like you just don't have time maybe just to stand there for an hour and a half, but something else there. But yeah, we can continue to delve into a lot of topics. I mean, there's specific regiments. I'm sure that we all have our favorites that we could talk about, and whatnot. But yeah, we're happy. Like it's been fun. The support's been fantastic. And again, I hope folks come out. Sign up if you haven't signed up already. If you've already signed up, no need to sign up again. We got you. But if you haven't signed up yet, please do so. It helps us to let the park know, as well as the friends know, how many folks are actually going to be in attendance. So that's very helpful. So, and I'm not sure if you caught that because my internet keeps popping in and out. So I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, he was gone. All right. Yeah, I think what he was saying was lets the friends know approximate numbers so they can order the right amount of food and all that kind of thing. So, but yeah, make sure you come out, especially that Saturday night. There's if any of us are authors, we usually have some of our books for sale. The friends usually have some things for sale that help fundraise for them. Get your stickers and things like that, which always grab one of those. But yeah, so it's always a lot of fun. My son, who's 10, he went last year for the first time when he was 9, and he loved it. I don't know if it's because he and Julian became such good friends, and they're about the same.
He had a battle buddy. Yeah.
Yeah. Or if it's because he was learning some Civil War history. I'll tell myself it was the latter, but I think it was because he had such a good time with his buddy there. So he's always asking, when are we going back to Perryville, and all that good stuff. So
that's great.
But yeah,
I got I've had some internet issues, so I don't know why. Nothing's changed. It's not raining or thunderstorming here, but it is what it is.
Is
So
it that acoustic shadow coming to get you now? Is that what's
my
happening with the
ass,
internet?
my ass.
Yeah, he couldn't join us because of
Just-
internet trouble.
That's I've always
Yeah,
heard that one, huh?
yeah,
I think the
right.
finger was just
I
too close
almost
to
heard
the
it.
X button there. But
Yeah. Yeah. You know what? We're doing a Buell program. Gosh darn it. Yeah. We'll sit there and stand for 90 minutes to read out of the OR. That will be
just stand and read. I've
engaging.
been on a few tours out east. I won't say where out east, and it was the guy he literally stood there and read the ORs, and like, wow,
I
this
could
I
have
was
done
ready
that.
for this.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was a paid tour. This is free, and if you don't
Yeah.
like it, well, you don't have to pay for the tour part.
Hey, and you're
So
in the Bourbon Belt too. I mean,
yeah,
That's
let's
right.
right.
You really got no excuses not to come, to be
No,
And
blatantly
you
honest.
at least get to walk around one of the most pristine Civil War
exactly.
battlefields
Yes.
in the
Yeah.
country. I mean,
Yeah.
it's um, that's a good thing about where Perryville is located is that it's not being bothered by or really that much
No.
by that urban sprawl that happens in so many other places.
I do have bad news though for everybody. We will not be going to Peters Hill this year. To
Oh,
say,
Wow.
yeah, I know, right? I know.
Wow.
We're breaking a record. I didn't even think we were going to make it last year. People said, "Well, we don't care if it's pitch dark. Let's go anyway." I'm like, "Oh,
the people
okay."
demanded it.
That's right.
They demanded it. The populace spoke, and we responded. So,
I mean, but if it's our luck, we'll have to pull it out maybe a day before the tour sets off to do a Peters Hill
Mhm.
or
tour.
something, right?
Yeah.
Just to tease people, right? Get out there and look, we're at Peters Hill again. So that's fun with that. Well, on that note, do we have anything else, gentlemen?
I don't believe
Don't
so.
think so.
Taylor, we appreciate you coming on with us here
Yeah,
again.
Go ahead.
thank you so much. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Heck
Yeah,
yeah.
we'll definitely have you back on soon to talk about many other topics
Thank you.
that we have planned for
Yeah.
this year. So
Thank you.
And even if we don't have something planned, we can always get together and do one of our infamous bull sessions.
That's
yeah,
right.
I
That's
think
right.
it's getting close to time to do another one of those. I
I think
believe.
you're right.
Yeah,
I think you're right. We
call up
invite a
some
few
of the
people.
guys and get this thing
Yeah.
going again. So.
Sounds good.
Um,
Good.
So with that, we just want to thank you all for listening. And just as a reminder, head to the website, westerntheatercivil.com. Check out all the stuff that's there. The blog post, ways you can support us, the events. And also we are, we know it really helps us out here if you can share this stuff.
Mhm.
If you listen on Spotify, if you listen on Apple Podcasts, where it is you listen, give us a hopefully 5-star rating. Share the podcast with other Civil War buffs, Civil War friends that you have. Because I feel like we do a decent job. At least that's what people tell us. Maybe there's videos. I think that might be what it is. But
we gotta quit having our relatives tell us how good we do,
I
right?
know
I
my
mean,
mom's always saying, "Oh, it's such a good podcast." And have you listened to it? Well, no.
uh,
No. but I just know it's good, sweetie. It's a yeah. But
that's
yeah.
hilarious.
So share share the stuff with your friends. Give us a thumbs up on YouTube. Put comments on there. Supposedly that helps with the algorithm. I don't know.
Yeah,
But
comments actually help because of the popularity of a
mhm.
YouTube video post. So comments actually do help. So
Yeah.
that would be a good thing.
So,
We just want to get
yeah.
out there and share what's going on in the Western Theater and share that with good people like Taylor Bishop. So
That's right. That's right. Well, with that, we will end this episode and we will catch you guys next time.